morning. First, I want to apologize and say I'm sorry I wasn't able to be here yesterday, so I hope it was a good day yesterday. And I'm going to take an approach here today of more just kind of giving some context and some background to where I come from in the relationship of looking at human interactions with buildings and things of that sort. I am an associate professor here at the University of Southern California. I'm in the Division of Occupational Science and Occupational Therapy. And so that's kind of what I want to just kind of talk about, because I don't know how many folks here are familiar with occupational science. It's one of those kind of disciplines that sits out there that isn't something that everybody is aware of. It was founded here at USC, and we're celebrating our 30th anniversary of founding the discipline this fall. So there'll be some things going on this fall related to that. But essentially, it started as a way to support the profession of occupational therapy through a scientific endeavor, but it's broader than just rehabilitation and occupational therapy. It's really looking at the science of everyday living and how we as humans actually spend our time and occupy our time. So occupations from that perspective, it's not just work, it's not just your job. We look at occupations as the chunks of activity that actually are part of this ongoing stream of what we're doing as humans. They are usually named in the lexicon, so yes, we think about jobs and those sorts of things, but anything down to taking notes or to eating lunch or eating dinner could be an occupation. They're goal-directed, they're purposeful, they have meaning to the individual, and they can kind of be understood in the culture. So we look at a variety of different components that go into human occupation and how we behave as humans. And looking at the human with all these various subsystems through sociocultural, information processing, the biological, the physical, all of those different things. The primary thing that always comes to mind with occupational therapy is the physical, is the actual physical, biological, being able to use our hands to do activities and to process information if somebody has some sort of physical or cognitive deficits. But we also look a lot at the sociocultural and how we look at the symbolic aspects of our environment and how we interact with people and what the culture is. And kind of then in general who we are as humans and kind of how that relates. So kind of all the way down to the body structure level, all the way up into the cultural level of kind of how do we engage with occupations. It's very complex, this thing that we do as humans. I think we all can appreciate that. Depending on where you come from, what your culture is, what your background is, and how we will behave to achieve those things. The core things that we look at in occupational science then focus around meaning and how we construct meaning related to the things that we're doing, how we interact in the space-time continuum. So how we're interacting with each other across time, interacting with things in our space and our environment to kind of participate in activities, and then that direct participation and engagement in that activity. How are we engaging with people, with the environment, with things, and how does that relate to health, well-being? It is very interdisciplinary kind of focus for occupational science itself. In the founding, bringing in lots of different theories and principles from different groups. The main thing then, the distinct contribution that I'll talk more about related to my work, is directly this kind of relationship between our human occupation, health, and well-being. And from that perspective, we look at both sides of the coin. I tend to look more at the negative side, where we're looking at the development of stress and injury due to the activities and the actions that we're doing, but also from the positive side. How do we recover from those things? How do we actually function despite having some sort of health well-being? So my research lab, the primary focus of my work is looking at musculoskeletal disorders. I'm looking all the way from prevention through assessment and rehabilitation, focused mostly in upper extremity, work-related injuries, but in general looking at workers and kind of their individual kind of things that are happening to them as they're performing their daily jobs, their daily tasks. This comes into some of my questions earlier about the actual employees. So most of my work currently is centered around kind of these three components and trying to link occupational performance, what we're doing as humans, to various health outcomes, how that may or may not impact body structures and what's going on internally, and kind of flow back through. One of our founders of our profession, this is a quote that we always kind of think about, is that through the use of our hands, we actually can influence our own health. So the things that we do and actually being engaged in activities. So that's kind of a core principle that I apply and that we look at is how do we actually engage and how do we actually perform things, and what is that relationship to health? How do we become who we are, and how do we belong to a community because of what we're doing? Again, I mentioned a lot of my work is the kind of negative side of this, and kind of looking at the development of stress, the imbalance that we may have in our lives that could lead to psychosocial issues, even things where we aren't able to be part of a community, and so we have deprivation. We aren't able to kind of belong in the acts, those sorts of things. Related directly to the negative implications and kind of the things that I look at with workers is this concept of presenteeism. And this is a growing kind of concern. It's the opposite of absenteeism, not really the opposite of absenteeism, but we know absenteeism, you're sick, you're in pain, you're having childcare issues, whatever it may be, you can't be at work and you're absent from work. Presenteeism is actually being at work, being engaged, being there, but not performing to your best capability because you're not feeling well, because you're having something going on. And this is actually a huge issue, especially here in the US, where people are coming into work and just not functioning to their highest level and their highest ability. And it's causing lots of problems. So these are types of things that I look at. These are active projects. I can't talk about all of these, of course, but I'll kind of give a little flavor of things that are going on. You can read more on my website about any one of these things. Primarily, again, looking at workers, looking at their general health and kind of wellness and how all these different things relate. A lot of my work, I use sonographic imaging to actually look at the body structures themselves. Carpal tunnel syndrome is one of my primary focus of my work. So we look at the carpal tunnel, we look at the median nerve in the carpal tunnel that can get entrapped and compressed, and we look at in individuals who have normal, healthy nerves versus those that have nerves that are inflamed, swollen, problematic, and kind of how that relates to their symptoms and their function. But then how do we relate that then to occupational performance and backward? It's really messy, and I think that's a problem that we don't really understand, and kind of how we fit all these different person factors, workplace factors, environmental factors, and individual factors together to really support this. One of the studies that we did a while back, actually now, was actually looking at the development of carpal tunnel syndrome related to work activities, where we had macaque monkeys actually reaching through and pinching and developed the problem of carpal tunnel syndrome. We actually were able to see changes in the nerve and see changes in the physiology due to that work activity. And so this primary study that I'm working on here is with dental hygienists. This is just an image to kind of show you what happens as we're working and using a tool. This happens to be my wrist. On the top image, you can see my hand at rest, and the bottom image when I'm actually just pinching to hold an instrument, and the median nerve itself and how it's getting compressed and entrapped. So my interests now are actually looking across time with our dental hygiene students here and trying to understand development of pathology, kind of how it relates. We're trying to understand if it's a linear relationship or if there's some sort of change that's occurring. And in combination with that, then we're looking at the overall general kind of what's going on in the environment. And so we're looking at the equipment, we're looking at the tools and kind of the environment that they're working in and their postures and positions. So, we're looking more globally at not just the hand and the wrist, but in general, how kind of are they positioning themselves, and are there ways that we can actually either improve the environment, improve their work, improve things from that perspective. I think a lot of my focus, in thinking about these things actually is more the flow through of all of these components together. How do our individual bodies, how does the individual environment kind of lead around to what's happening with the occupational performance, and how does this relate to health and well-being? A couple of examples of this. This is a dynamic image of individuals that are opening and closing their hands. So you can actually see what's happening to the median nerve. In the top image, the nerve doesn't change a whole lot. In the bottom image, you see that kind of the darker circle there. I'm kind of flying through these, I apologize. Changes. And we're all different. This individual on the right here has a nerve that's split into two. And so thinking about those individual considerations and individual things that are going on, and kind of how does that link backward and forward, and how does it flow through. This is more conceptualized, I think, in kind of one of the active projects that's going on that is funded by the M3X program. Working here with Burchin and Gail on this project to look at our office environments, to look at how we can build a workstation that actually is sensitive not only to the environment that the person's working in, but also to the individual. My long-term goal, one of my primary goals with this is thinking about how we can change behavior, how we can support the individual to kind of improve and promote positive, healthy work behaviors. So looking at kind of this profile of being able to sense, being able to understand what's going on in our environment. We're looking at temperature, so thermal, lighting, as well as posture in the environment, such that if the workstation senses that the individual is becoming uncomfortable or becoming too warm, too cold, it will help to try to alter or change the environment. Similarly, some of the downstream effects, again, of, from my perspective, changing behavior. Can we give some feedback or input, learn what the individual is doing properly or improperly, and kind of help them change over time? Also looking at energy use, some of those things to kind of help support more global environmental things from that perspective. So again, just kind of looking at all the different components of that lighting, the temperature, thermal, how we can actually support and promote kind of our overall health wellness, and then even moving into other things of energy, productivity, performance, those sorts of things over time. So, and that was really quick, but.